Welcome to For the Record, an unfiltered view on current trends and timeless advice for surviving in the aesthetics industry. Whether you're an injector, practice owner, sales rep, or marketer, it's time to set the record straight. Each week, we cut through the chaos and showcase diverse perspectives and winning ideas from the best minds in the industry. I'm your host, Dr. Tiffany Hall, Chief Growth Officer at Aesthetic Record. Now, let's get started on this week's episode. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of For the Record. This is episode 46 of season 3, and we're going down a whole different path today. We're going to talk a lot today about legal and compliance and really the buying to exit strategy of your medical spa, what to think about, what to know, what to do. And we have a true expert on today. We have Justin Marti from the Marti Law Group, who himself is also an entrepreneur before he was an attorney. He was a big, stellar 25-year-old who built a 45-location dental practice, sold it for a whole bunch of millions of dollars, and decided to go back to law school, I'm guessing somewhere along the way there, and become an attorney. And so now he's bringing his expertise to medical spas, to aesthetics, helping you guys buy and sell and do contracts and delegation and GFEs and all the things. So he is here with us today. Justin, welcome to our show. We are so glad to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, we met from our good friend Ben Hernandez at SkyTail, who is like Kevin Bacon of aesthetics, who connects the whole world. And I'm always looking for great, brilliant legal eagles, if you want to call them that, to help us with our clients here. And you have a very compelling story. You're very successful outside of being an attorney, so you're a true business consultant as well. So give our audience a little bit of a flair for who you are and what you do and kind of how you got here, and then we're going to dive into all the good stuff.
I can jump into that a little bit. I first have to say, I think it was Eric Pastan who introduced us via Eric via Ben. So Eric was actually one of my old business partners when we had our dental group going, and you make it sound so exciting when we were scaling 45 offices, and it was an interesting journey. But yeah, I was in Boston, 26, kind of living like the post-college glory years. I was in sales, working with a lot of physicians and in a patient financing practice, and got approached by a dentist, a brother and sister team actually, and they had a couple locations. And wanted to scale this model. I knew nothing about dentistry other than my mother had been my hygienist for 26 years, and I never had a cavity, knock on wood. And so I jumped in, and we opened a practice in Massachusetts. We opened another. Some other partners joined on, as well as Eric. And 12 years later, 40 some odd locations. And along that journey, I decided, I don't have enough going on. I had my son, married son. Let's go to law school too. Why not? So threw that on, and really had no thought of practicing law, which is, people were like, what are you doing here in law school? But just, I don't know, I'm a nerd, I guess, at the end of the day. Like, I wanted to keep learning. We had this big organization that I felt like maybe we should get a little more familiar with contracts that we're reading and writing every single day. And so 4 years came and went part-time, and I graduated right around the time we exited the business. So it was like this pivot of cool, great ride, but now what? And so this kind of made sense.
Well, that's crazy that you did it while you were also running this organization, because I did a PhD, which I didn't need to do, by the way. I already had an MBA. I was running, doing business stuff already. And I thought, why not go get one? Just do it. And it was hell on earth to do that and also be a working professional. So I empathize with you. But the fact you did it is incredible, because I think you bring now to the table a great mix of both the legal aspect, but, having done it yourself. I think we hear a lot about private equity and MSOs and buying and selling and strategies. And it's like, are you the professor or are you the person who's actually done it? And you've actually done it. So I think it's a different perspective. But, thinking about Eric, our friends at SkyTail, we talk about this a lot now in the industry. 5 years ago, it wasn't even thought about. Like, the word private equity meant nothing 5 years ago. And now it's on everyone's tongue all the time. Very hot item. So you guys do both business and healthcare law there. How much of your practice is really focused on, sort of that startup to exit strategy concept versus actually in med spas helping them with building their businesses and like the day-to-day contract law, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I would say our practice is much more heavily weighted on folks kind of getting in or getting out. So the M&A, the mergers and acquisitions piece, is very big. And as you mentioned, like, I came from the dental world where the M&A and the transactions, the consolidation has been going on for quite a while now. And med spa world is, it's like looking back 10 years almost. So we're getting more and more involved in the med spa, again, kind of following the SkyTail model, right? Like they were heavy in dental, they've seemed to pivot, and we've kind of pivoted as well, and to this whole new world of aesthetics, which is super exciting. And then, yeah, there is that other component of our practice where we're helping folks scale. They're hiring injectors, they're hiring staff and adding locations. And there's a lot that goes into that. Of course, navigating all these wonderful regulations from state to state, which are, super consistent, right? So we try to help a lot of our folks with that. And then, of course, when PE comes calling and people want to exit, we're trying to help them through the transition as well.
Well, I ask because people who watch our show or listen to our show are oftentimes in that growth phase of the practice where they've started it, they have something, on the table, but they want to actually grow and develop and then think about maybe exiting later on. And I always tell them, like, the day that you start your business, you have to build it for the exit. Like, start today with what you're going to be in 10 years or what you're going to be in 15 years, because if you don't, when that day comes, you'll be penalized tenfold for not having done it right from the beginning. We call it technical debt in software development, but it's the same thing in a practice. So, and again, guys, this is not legal advice. Justin's here as a guest. He's not here to tell you how to run your business. So
thank you.
Don't go out and tell the legal team here that, well, Justin said so. But thinking through that model, when you get them ready for an exit strategy, what are the things that you wish or that you have to have in place from that practice that, the checklist of the top 10 things, like, is it delegation agreements? Is it, if they have a partnership they've already put in place, like, what are the things you have to have that are for you a non-negotiable to take a practice in essence to market and get them sold?
It's such a great question. I mean, you really are so spot on with, you got to start with the end in mind. And so many people don't, right? Like when we started our dental group, but I wasn't thinking about a PE exit when I first, hung a dental shingle. But we had so much kind of, fixing to do at the end, and the legal bills were, astronomical because we just had to put so many things in place. And you look to a private equity buyer, they're like, they're a little messy, they're a little sloppy. That directly correlates to what you're getting paid, right, when you go to sell. So the first thing, if we get engaged early on in kind of the life cycle of a practice, I'm so happy because we can kind of iron out any things that are missing, put the agreements in place that might not be there, collaboration, delegation, whatever the state calls for, so that when they do go to exit, or the MSO, right, the management services organization, if you've got some folks involved who might be more of an investor type than a provider, depends on the state, but just putting those pieces together. So when you go to market, you're like a well-oiled machine, and you look structured properly. So, I always try to kind of get a roster of who's involved in these practices, what's their role? Are they clinical? Are they non-clinical? If we've got like an MSO structure, we actually create two different entities really within that business. So to the outside world, they're seeing blank med spa. They don't know that there's kind of like this bifurcated business, but the legal nerds, we kind of divide it up and we categorize people under, a lot of nerd talk today. We kind of divide it up under, the type of role that they have. So again, when we can go to sell the business, or, we talk to someone like SkyTail and they're entertaining different offers for practice, it's very clean. The funds flow, right? Like how people are getting paid, if that money is coming into the entity the right way, or if it's funneling out to, we've got to make sure it's really tight. So it passes all the compliance checks and everything when they go to exit, and hopefully maximize their value.
Well, I have a question for you that is going to sound like a loaded question. And I'm going to tell you that in advance. So when someone decides, and I want to talk about MSOs in a second and kind of go through that, but when someone comes and says, I want to do the exit thing, I'm ready, I think I'm in a great place to do it, how important is it in that moment? I think about this all the time, Justin. It haunts me in my sleep that, like paying commission on a medical procedure is illegal. We know that in all 50 states, fee splitting is not allowed. Productivity bonuses are, things like that are. If I'm paying my entire team commission split on all that they're doing right now, when a PE firm comes in and buys me, how likely are they to follow the state law or say, you know what, you've been doing commission all these years, like, let's just keep breaking the law and doing it. It's fine. Like, I want to know for people who are listening to this, or like your consents aren't good. Like your consents don't protect you as a practice. When they come in, they figure out that your consents aren't good, they change them. Or you don't have the right medical director collaboration agreement. Like, how involved at that point for practices who are like, I'm under the radar doing things on my own, not getting caught, will they start turning that stuff over and looking under the hood and then saying, wait a minute, this has to stop. We cannot do it this way anymore. So is it better to just get it done right the first time? Like, again, loaded question, but I want to know how much they get involved in the minutia of the businesses that they buy, you know, once they kind of get it, you know, get in the ink's dry.
Yeah, they turn over every stone, right? And I get why they're large organizations and they're growing and there's more and more eyes on them, and governing bodies are constantly looking for, you know, ways to poke holes in these organizations. So we dealt with it at our dental group. You know, we had a lot of growing pains that we didn't know we were doing something wrong, right? So when an audit came along, that's when we learned. Wish I was an attorney, you know, prior, but yeah, I mean, they're going to look into everything that's going on, and we get so many folks that are a single operator, and there's so much misinformation. I was listening to Ernice on your show, right, who's like fantastic, and she was talking about there's really no gray area. It's just black and white, but I think people feel like it's gray because they don't understand, or they've been told by their friend who has a spa, you know, not far away, that they're doing this and it's always worked. So it's super important that we try to get you. It may not be perfect, you know, like you may have some document that was deficient that we might have to get cleaned up, but yeah, the PE folks are going to come in and they're going to really look under the hood pretty well to make sure that they're buying a legitimate organization. And I mean, all the time, you mentioned commission, right? Like all the time we're dealing with it. This is how I pay people. Like, it's fine. Everyone does this. And I'm like, listen, I'm not the ethics police, but I just want you to be aware that this is something that you gotta be cognizant of, and you need to restructure it. Sometimes it's just the terminology, right? Like at the end of the day, if it's a percent versus a flat fee and how you're paying something, you know, you can back into that flat fee, right? Again, this is not legal advice, but there's ways to kind of come up with a number that works, just not a percent. And so that's spot on, is that the PE groups and the bigger the bigger med spa models that are coming in are really looking to, you know, not lay out their exposure, and they're going to want to tighten things up.
Yeah, I can give legal advice. No, I'm kidding. I can't either. But I always say productivity bonuses work. Like, it's the same idea. It's just not tying it. I always think about like a person to person. Like, I treated Justin, so I made this. No, I treated a bunch of patients in the course of the month, and collectively I was productive for the business and I made X. Like, it's all about semantics, right? Like, it's not a quid pro quo of like, I did it and I got this kind of thing. But anyway, right. I won't belabor on that point. But I think it is important to think about, you know, all these things that you're doing every day as a practice. There are people who just like you out there who can help us to audit our practices and look at everything before we get to the point that a PE firm comes in and says, wait a minute, Justin, what are you thinking? This group is not buttoned up. Their stuff's a mess. Like, life is not good. And all of a sudden that multiplier comes down, and I'm not happy with my end goal or my exit strategy. So right. I think it's like an SEO audit, right? In marketing, we do SEO audits, we do website audits. It's kind of like the same thing. Audit your paperwork, audit your documentation, make sure it's good. But to that same idea about nurses and MSOs, I live in Texas, which is a big litigious state around nurses, and anyone here can inject, but the laws are actually very, very intense, despite them not sounding that way. So we get a lot of like people getting arrested, losing their license. So there's a big debate here about MSOs, and can an RN own a practice or not own a practice? And if she does, where's the medical director? So give us kind of a high level. If you guys have already heard this, it's good to hear it again, about what is an MSO and why do I need an MSO if I'm a physician, and even if I am a physician, do I need to have an MSO as well? So give us kind of the MSO high level thing.
Yeah, MSO 101. So for folks who don't know, most people probably do, it's a management services organization, right? Or management support organization. We love our acronyms, right? And in law and in business. So essentially it's a model that you can structure your organization so you can have licensed providers owning practices, owning medical practices. It all stems, I guess, to back up, it all stems from corporate practice of medicine, or CPOM as we call it, right? And basically this doctrine that came along, years and years ago in different states and basically said, if you're not a provider, a licensed medical provider, you can't own a practice. Some states still very strict, right? California, there's certain states out there that are very much like we are a CPOM state and we're going to enforce it to the max. Some states are are actually CPOM states, but they've openly said we're not going to enforce it, which is always amazes me. Like they're saying it is a regulation, but we don't have time. And then others are not CPOM states, and essentially anyone can own a practice. And so you can see how there's already confusion right there. Then you layer on the fact that, okay, like, what is a provider though? Like, what's the proper provider? Do I have to be a physician? Like you said, do I have to, can an NP do it? You've got a big movement from different nursing associations that have really pushed to have independent practice states. So now you've got maybe half the states and counting who are pivoting from physician only owned practice to now nurse practitioners. Sometimes physician assistants can own practices. So there's like all these regulations that get jumbled in there. So certainly if you have a Wall Street backed, right, a private equity backed organization, they're probably going to go with an MSO structure because they're looking across state lines. So even if they're targeting Texas, which may be set up one way, I sit right now up here in Connecticut, that might be structured a different way than it is. So, for these PE groups who are just looking to find the best target they can, they might be going across state lines and they're going to say, like, let's just set up our structure this way. And a lot of these states will even do what's called a sub MSO, right? Basically like a junior company for the state. And so then they'll operate that way. And all the funds, it's crazy, like how we have all the funds flow up to one entity and what business pays what. It's a whole lot of kind of, whiteboarding things, trying to figure it all out when we first engage a new client with this type of structure. So you get providers who are fully licensed and still kind of want to have an MSO model in place. And then you've got a lot of folks who, it can be a little overwhelming at first. So they're trying to stay far away from the MSO model, but they may not have a choice. It really depends on their license level, if they have one, and the state that they're in.
Well, I think you can operate as, well, there's a misconception that you can own the practice without an MSO if you're, let's say, an RN, like in Texas. I mean, technically you can't, right? Like you think you own it, but at the end of the day, in the eyes of the law, because we had this discussion, a couple had a practice who was going to sell, and the company came in and said, well, I would love to buy it from you, but you can't even legally own it. So what are you selling to me? Like, you can't even own this practice. So immediately I'm cutting your multiplier in half, like not going to work. Because obviously if you didn't follow this law, what other laws are you not following, or what other things are not structured correctly they have to correct when I come in? So I think that there's a business need. Forget the fact that it's like physicians and nurses and healthcare and, patient safety, blah, blah, blah. We all know all that. We all get all that. But I think there's a compelling business need, if you ever intend to exit your business, to make sure that structure is done correctly in the beginning, because you can't sell what you don't own. And if you do try to sell it, you might not get enough out of it because you didn't own it correctly, legally. So I think that there is a big movement right now. I mean, I'm sure that you would agree this industry is booming, growing like wildfire. And this is going to come up every day, all day. And your friend down the street, Karen, who owns a med spa, is not your legal advice. She's not your attorney. Don't listen to her. Do your own thing. Do your own research. But are you hearing this where people come in and they, it's like, I can't really own it, but I guess I do own it? Like, how does it even work in the eyes of the law, in the eyes of like business transactions?
Yeah, there's times where even we get overwhelmed, right? Or like, we have all our state to state regulations, but they change so quickly. And we're like, I got to go back to the well in this thing, and I've got to research it. And this, we were talking before, right? There's changes maybe afoot in New York, and like everywhere we're looking, the regulations are constantly evolving, which again is why I think people feel like it's gray, because they don't understand. And we've contacted medical boards directly and had them give us completely opposing answers than what a statute says. And it's like, I don't know, I want to say laughable, but I'm just like, how you're the ones who are supposed to know and tell us, right? Like, how do we advise a client to make sure they're compliant? And we don't have liability when you're the governing body and you don't know. So I think nobody really seems to have ill will in any of the folks we deal with, right? Whether if they're a nurse, like they're genuinely trying to do something great and, build a business and take care of patients. It's just that there's sometimes ambiguous guidelines that they have to navigate through. And, I'm seeing more services now from, like medical director services where you can kind of engage an MD. And a lot of these folks have caught on that it's I think the doctors have caught on, hey, this is good, a good gig. But even then you have to be careful, because if these MDs who are offering these kind of agreements and collaboration agreements, it differs from state to state. Like the language that's in the contract is different from state to state sometimes. So yeah, it's the Wild West still. I mean, I love this industry and it's a lot of fun, but there is times where, candidly, like it's intimidating because you have to really know your stuff.
Well, I think what you said about the nurses is so important and that's what I think I hate most here, is that they're trying to do nothing wrong. Like they're earnestly trying to run a great business and do good things for the patients and for the community, all the things we want them to do. And because the laws are very gray when it comes to like the medical board taking a stance or a stand on something, you never know. It's a toss up. But, you get caught in these traps that you don't even know are set for you because you don't even know the law has changed or whatever's happened. So I think it really goes back to, you have to have, I don't care what you pay for your marketing person a month, take that money and go get a really good legal advisor. Like there's nothing more important as a business owner that you should have in your corner than a legal advisor, an attorney, a law firm of sorts. If you've got multiple people who can help you, whatever that may be for you, you've got to have that, because no one cares if your Instagram gets stolen. They care if you have to go to jail or lose your license,
right.
or lose your family's all your money and your kids can't go to school, and whatever these things are. But that's what the risk is. It's not about your website SEO not being good enough. It's about you legally can't run your business anymore. And I think we get very confused in this industry because we are at a high growth area, high growth industry. People get very disillusioned with which thing to focus on. And it's definitely the latter. It's definitely the legal side of me, not the other side. But funny story, I called the medical board. I won't say what state it's in. And I asked about having physicians from other states come in and inject for a meeting. And they were like, well, the better choice is to have a non-licensed person inject than a physician who's out of state, because then we don't have to regulate them. Like, as long as you just get somebody who's not licensed at all, like off the street, let them inject a patient, that's easier for us to say you can do than to say a doctor from Texas can inject in Minnesota, wherever it is. I was just like, my mouth hit the floor. You can't be serious. Like, yeah, just a state to state thing is really hard for us. Just get a non-licensed person.
Right. I hope they preface it with, this is not legal advice. Otherwise, they probably could have some trouble.
And they record all those calls. And I'm like, did someone listen to that call and play the tapes back and say, oh my God, what did you tell that person? No, they didn't. I can promise you. But I just think that there's a lot of things right now that are kind of at risk of us just knowing the rules and knowing the laws. But, from a perspective of what you guys do, we were just discussing before the podcast, you have like a whole SaaS model, a whole membership model for folks who are in all kinds of stages within their journey. Give me an idea of how that works. Someone who's going to, hire you guys to be their helper. What does that cost? What do they get? Because I think people think it's really out of reach financially. And based on what I just saw, yours is definitely not out of reach and a really good investment.
Thank you. It's fun. Like we engage certain clients to kind of, take on our membership model. And when I say certain, it's if someone needs a one-off agreement, maybe there's an opportunity to work together on an ongoing basis. But when I really see, these younger kind of earlier in the life cycle practices, they've just started or they're getting ready to start, or maybe they're a couple years into it, but they're growing, there's really an opportunity for us to kind of work together. And they join a membership program with us. So, every month there's different levels, kind of like any membership, right? There's kind of the base level, you get this much attorney time, there's the max level, you get unlimited attorney time, you get access to documents. And really it's just, we have our monthly calls with folks. And other people were available kind of as much as they need us. Some people want to talk every day. Some people, they're like, I don't need a call this month. But we really are. We aim to be like their legal partner and help them grow. And it's just super cool to watch them kind of like grow as an entrepreneur. See like what they're building, just continue to scale, see happy patients, and know that they're also kind of legally compliant. I'll be honest, like I always kind of, I call myself kind of an advisor first, like a business, entrepreneur first and lawyer second. Like I did my law stuff, right? I passed my tests. I'm here as a licensed attorney, and that's great. I'm very fortunate that I've surrounded myself, I think, with much better attorneys around me. I think I have strong attorneys on my team. we're definitely not, we're definitely not the type to say we do it all. If you have some very nuanced compliance deal, I'll say, great. Like we have somebody to help you with that. Another firm, other lawyer. So we really niched down into what we do well. And part of that, again, is just like the foundational, fundamental business stuff, so you're growing. What should you have in place? What kind of agreements and relationships should you have? Even like, let's look at this vendor that you're using. Can we negotiate that a little bit? Obviously not aesthetic record, but, how do we, maximize these relationships as you scale? And so for a lot of people, they love it. We talk every month. We have a lot of crossover actually with like SkyTail and some other groups where they're advising people on the finance side and business strategy. And we kind of will spot check it from a legal standpoint. There's been a lot of times, where I've actually sent a client over to them because I feel like, this person's almost outgrown what they need from us. Like we're structured pretty sound. They need the financial, wherewithal to just go and just really explode. So it's cool. And we do try to price it, realizing money's tight and no matter how big your organization, right? Like you're paying, like you said, you're marketing folks and you're paying, your compliance and you're training people. Like it can be a cash eating monster really quickly. So we've tried to price this pretty reasonably. I should know off the top of my head and I don't, but I think for, 500 something, right, is kind of our base end. And then for maybe close to 1,000, you kind of get access to us as much as you want. And we've looked at the competitors and we kind of see where they are. And we intentionally priced, we may not be the lowest, but we've intentionally priced at a spot where I feel like we're a little more approachable. And, we want to have a relationship. The last thing I want is somebody like frustrated with us because they feel like they're not getting the value that they're paying for.
Well, I think you just hedge your bets, right? It's scale. You get lots of folks in there with you, and then eventually they sell, and that's, I'm sure, a more involved thing. I'm sure that the M&A side's probably not in the membership, like day-to-day part, actually brokering the deal, doing that part. But I think you mentioned Ernest Williams, and it made me think about this. You said you're a business advisor first. I think what people forget about engaging an attorney, let's say yourself, is that you get more than just like legal stuff. You get more than like legalese all day long. You're also helping them decide how to run their business and even if it's like what to purchase and how to, if they're going to next location expand, what medical director they should be, be bringing on because of the contract or whatever they want, want that to look like. Like there's a whole business aspect to this that is invaluable beyond the attorney relationship with you as a legal person that I think is a big, I charge a lot an hour to do consulting. I would not fit in your membership plan if they called me more than 3 times a month. So I know that it's an incredible deal, by the way. So I feel like there's a big benefit there too on the business aspect side of it that you get more than just contract reviews. But alternatively, also going to like your local family attorney down the street who knows nothing about healthcare law, nothing about contract law in this industry is also, not only a waste of money in many cases, but could be, adverse for you long term if you don't have a person who's kind of niche down aesthetics. So I think there's a big benefit to finding a person. There's not that many of you out there who just do aesthetics type law, this M&A, MSO kind of thing. That's a pretty unique skill set. So, if you guys are looking for attorneys, certainly I have, my seal of endorsement for you is always, definitely there, but it's hard to find. So you got to go with, there's like, I think 3 or 4 of you that I know of that do this all the time. So the pickings are slim, as they say in Arkansas, where I'm from. But you don't know that. You're a northerner.
But I agree. There's really very few, and we, it's intentional that we have just niched down to this area. I don't know the days of the general practitioner. I know folks who do it, and I don't know how, like, you stay abreast of all these everything going on, and we even, right, like we just talked about at med spa, state to state, how different it can be in aesthetics, and like even staying, on top of that is more than a full-time job. So I think really niching down, it was important for us and maximizing this area. And there really are, Ernest has been like, a lot of ways, she might not know it, but like a mentor looking at stuff she talks about. And then, some of the other folks that we've discussed before are, really good at what they do. And I think that's one of the differences at our firm is like, we absolutely want people to come on as clients. We want to make them happy, but we also are very quick to say, again, this is something that we have to find a privacy, specific attorney, or, you need to defend your license in court. We are not litigators. I wouldn't know where to go in the courtroom. So let's get you to the best person for that. And I think, that's been a big difference, a goal really of our firm versus others I've worked, we've encountered, right? When we ran our dental group, I felt like fantastic lawyers, top Ivy League schools, like really great people. But there was, in some instances, like a lack of just common business kind of acumen. And I'm like, now when I talk to providers, it's such a different conversation because I'm like, I've been in your shoes. I mean, I have not been an injector, but I've been in your shoes, driving this thing at a medical practice. And so I kind of know what you're feeling. And this is what we did, and maybe this was the wrong thing that we did, so let's try this. And I don't know, I find kind of a little bit of a tangent here, I guess, but just kind of being a little more open-minded and, saying, hey, we can work collectively. We can bring in other folks. We can admit when we don't know something is okay, right? When I get a call for like someone who's frantic in need of a divorce, I'm like, I'm very sorry to hear that. Here's a guy, or a gal. But it's just not something that I would do. So I would advise folks, if nothing else, like call, one of the 3 or 4 or 5 groups who do this.
Well, you mentioned getting in early with these, with these accounts. I call them accounts, with these practices. I think one of the things that I have found compelling about Ernice, about you, and others as well, is that you come to it from an idea of let's fix the problem before it occurs, not scare people to death. And so they're like panicking that they're going to, go to jail, lose their license. All these things are going to happen that are bad. Because I think that we can curtail a lot of the bad things in the beginning if we just do things right, get things set up correctly, all that kind of stuff. But, to that point, you do a lot of content development. I've seen blogs from you nonstop lately. You got lots of things on LinkedIn. You're constantly building content and putting things out there. From like a business running person standpoint, not an attorney, like in this industry that's constantly moving and constantly growing, like how do you, kind of carve out your niche and like decide what things are important to your firm? And like when you talk to an account, again, guys, to practice, is it delegation agreements? Is it buy and sell agreements? Like, there's a million things you could be doing right now, Justin. How do you focus on what things you want to go to market as? I think as a practice, it's the same kind of decision of like, I can do all kinds of things. Which thing matters to me? And you mentioned niching down. You mentioned where you're going to price your business to compete. Like you're saying the things that make my heart warm and fuzzy. Tell me what your thought process on that, because we can use that to kind of, back into now my sex practice. How do I do the same thing for myself here? So give us your ideas.
So, well, it was interesting. I had a conversation with somebody once who said, start blogging, start talking about these things, because there's not enough content out there. That person, of course, was you. You might not recall that, but I made a big note right there. So, and you were right. As I poked around for information, I'm like, it's an overwhelming amount of information that people need to know. We're never going to get through it all, right, in one, I don't know, lifetime probably, but I think starting with the fundamentals, like I mentioned before, even the business fundamentals, like, okay, I'm setting up this aesthetics practice. What does that mean? Like, do I need to hire people? Do I need, okay, I need to hire people. I need injectors, right? So what do I need to legally, be compliant and have an injector working for me? And well, if I'm a physician, I can get a delegation agreement, probably I can do that. And just kind of like working up from the bottom. And I think once you have a lot of that in place, now it's easier to start kind of adding on and layering on, right? And for our law firm, right, I'm working on the content creation, which I hate right now. I think I need JT on my team because I look at it and I cringe, but it's like, this is an area we've got to constantly improve upon. But before I do that, it's like, let's check the latest regulations. Let's check, what legislative acts are coming that we need to keep an eye on, because that's at the core of what we do. And you're so right. Like it really can be very easy to get lost in the weeds. When someone comes to us, I mean, we kind of have our little internal checklist to see what's in place that they have, what looks a little fishy, does this provider is not really there, but, there's kind of an agreement that says they're supposed to be. So we'll do a lot of poking holes. And the last thing I am, again, is like the ethics police. And I really genuinely believe people are meaning to do things right. They just don't know. So we'll kind of start at the ground floor and try to analyze, all right, where's the most exposure? I'm not going to tell them you're going to go to jail for doing this. I'll tell them like, yeah, there's liability here, and we want to protect you. So let's start with that. Cool. We patch that hole. Like, let's look at the next thing. You know what, let's bring in these guys here, let's get some financial eyes on this and just kind of organically try to keep them going build some momentum and go in the right direction.
Well, and I think it's always interesting that an attorney will give you real advice. If you go to even to your CPA or to your, business coach or whoever else, they kind of sugarcoat things like, well, I mean, what you're doing could be working and keep trying it. You guys are like, it's not working. It's not going to work. Quit doing it. I mean, right. I think you're very quick to say, at least in my experience with attorneys, we have them obviously here at AR, but you're quick to say that's not going to work. The risk is too great. You can't overcome that. Stop doing it. Like beating your head against the wall is not going to change things. So I feel like when you have an attorney in your corner, you have like a litmus test. You have the button of like, it's the easy button of someone who's going to say to you, stop the madness. It's not going to work. And I think you looking through, all these things from the ground up is really probably how you're doing that with a customer of yours saying, I don't know what you're doing here, but you got to quit doing it. But, in that same, kind of vein, let's say I come to you, we've looked at my business, we've changed it, we've grown it, we're good to go. And then I decide I want to exit. And so I come drop that bomb in your lap in our meeting in November. Hey, I want to exit. What happens next? And why would I choose that, as a practice to say, I'm putting that flag in the sand. What is the benefit for me if I'm, an entrepreneur who's successful, making lots of money? Why do I even want to do that? And if I do it, like, what does it even look like? So give us now you did the MSO high level. Give us the M&A high level now.
So, yeah, I mean, this is like when they drop that bomb that they're ready to exit, which I get. They're hearing about people selling for, millions of dollars, and they're like, okay, it's my turn. First thing I do is honestly, it's like, okay, let's have a sit down, or virtual talk. Are you ready? Like literally those 3 words, are so important. And I mean, I do talks on this and I do like coaching on this, and I could talk legal stuff all day. We could talk business, commentary all day, but the very first thing when someone goes to sell is like, really, you need to have a gut check. And why? Because someone's going to buy your organization and you might now become an employee, right? And Mr. Ms., person, entrepreneur are now, clocking in and clocking out, right? And I know that sounds a little harsh, but really that's what happens. And I cannot tell you how many deals we've gotten to the finish line and it really like hits, our client representing the seller, and it just hits them like, well, wait, when do I get, when's payroll come out? And when, and it's just those things that they haven't done for however many years. And, it's just not in our entrepreneurial mindset, right? Like the scariest thought to an entrepreneur is like, okay, go get a job. So that's the biggest piece, is the gut check. So when I have folks like a dentist who's been at it 40 years and they're winding down, it's usually a little bit of an easier pill to swallow. They're like, this is the natural progression. When you have someone who's, in their, 30s, 40s, 50s at their peak of their game, a lot of times they do. Like I have to really sit with them and talk. It has nothing to do with law. It's just literally like, person to person. Are you ready for this? Because things will change. You're definitely going to get a nice check. But is that enough to, to adjust to this new lifestyle? And some groups, I don't want to make it like working for corporate's terrible, right? Some groups are they want the practitioner to continue to be autonomous, or the seller to be, doc, keep doing what you've been doing, or, in NP, please, like, don't change anything. Others come in and folks really do feel the change. So I think that's the first piece, is like, let's really discuss, like, are you ready? And then, then we kind of get into, what does this deal look like? What are the deal terms? No shock, people look right at the bottom line. What's the dollar amount I'm getting? I really don't want to speak poorly about any of the big PE groups. So, I put this out there, but I'm scared of the pushback. But you have to look beyond like the big carrot that's dangled is the key to this, I think, because you're probably gonna have a lot of money thrown in front of you, which is very attractive. When we went to sell our business, I mean, the first number I saw, I was like, oh my, this is the greatest thing ever. Like, we're worth that much money. But as you kind of back into it, you're like, okay, this much of it is getting paid up front. This much of it is an earn out, which means, you better keep performing. Otherwise you're not going to see it. this portion we're going to take and we're going to issue you equity, which could be very valuable, if the company sells down the road. But there's just like, it starts dwindling down and you're like, oh, by the way, we have to pay off that debt and that. So some folks at the end of it are like, like that's all I'm walking away with, right? So there's a lot of like dissecting the LOI, the letter of intent or whatever comes in to really figure out like, is this the right deal for this individual? And then that's where, some of these advisory groups are great because they'll bring maybe multiple buyers to somebody. But every one of those deals really has to be vetted to see if it makes sense for the individual.
Yeah, you got a lot to unpack there. So let me catch up with you.
Sorry.
No, I think it's great because you mentioned a lot of things there that are compelling for me. So there was a big buyout a group here in Essex recently who, a lot of practices came together and now the CEO, whatever. Long story short, I got a call last week or weeks ago and they're like, okay, now I want to do marketing. Like we want to do video promotion, like you mentioned, we want to do production. We want to have a legitimate marketing arm. We want to promote these practices. So they're going to have this insatiable, incredible, wonderful growth because now they can corporately combine things in a GPO and go to market to a group like ours and say, hey, we want to film and produce and do commercials. What would it cost us? Versus like mom and pop trying to do it on their own, right, times 13, 15, 6, it's not going to work. So I think there are corporately some amazing benefits. Hiring legitimate, a CHRO, a CMO, a CGO, a CTO. You can now afford chief officers where you couldn't as Karen, who owns her own practice. You just can't do the cash outlay with, I know you can't. Trust me, I have this problem every day here. But you can do so many more things that are professional services related when you have a PE firm come in and say, I will front the money to get this done because I see the long-term payout. So I think there's a corporatization that is actually incredibly beneficial. And the employees forget that they can benefit too. Now we have a giant med spa group. I can have different jobs, regional trainer, regional director, practice manager, whatever that may be for me. I can change and grow because I now have a corporate structure. So there's lots of benefits there. But what you mentioned about it no longer being yours, I think is the fun part because I've had so many folks who got to the end and said I had to back out. I realized that it's no longer mine. I have no say in it. The second bite of the apple doesn't taste as good. I don't care what they say. Like I want to stay in and be my thing. And then even for us here, an experience we had where they offered us an amount that was terrible. It's like, I could make that next year. Like I made the entire amount they gave me as their multiplier in the next year in revenue. Like that, I'm not an idiot.
Right.
And so, this fast, quick, dirty, let's get it on the books. Let's get it done. Here's your LOI. And it's all happening so fast. And you hear the money and you're like, you can't even get your breath. And it's all just coming out in the speed of light. So I think there is like this it's a big sexy, to your point. The numbers sexy, all the things you're going to get are sexy. And then it's not, or it's the enemy. And like, how dare you go corporate? How dare you sell out and do that? Yep. Like the camps are very opposed. But what if you're competing in a community against an M&A kind of, PE group? Let's say that I am a small med spa and your people come in, and they do a deal. And now I'm competing against that person down the street. What is the difference there in like this organically built, kind of de novo model where I have my own thing versus like some big conglomerate? Because I think that's what people want to know. Can I even compete? And if I can, I'll stay. And if I can't, I'll have to sell because I don't want to die on the vine trying to survive if I'm, never going to make it. Long-winded question there, Justin.
No, and it's also, it's a tremendous consideration just for business owners in general, right? Like you're trying to run your mom and pop and, you have a legacy and people, the diner right next door to my building and the same folks have gone there for, probably 30, 40 years. And then there's, massive chains all around and there's people, gravitating towards those. And it's kind of like, well, how do I hang with the big guys? And, it sounds a little bit cliche probably, but staying true to someone's core, I feel like is so, so valuable. If you've got a name in your community and a reputation and you love your patients, and, they're coming to you, they're giving you the 5-star reviews, which are incredibly important. Everybody get those 5-star reviews. That's my marketing ad for the day. You'll be able to compete. You've done it this far. You'll continue to be able to compete. Yes, the MSOs and the PE folks are going to come calling to you next because they can tell you have a strong organization. But there really is kind of enough to go around. I mean, it's really like so polarizing, right? I go on LinkedIn or something and I'll see just these like rants of people saying like, if you sell out, you are literally like dead to me. You are the enemy. And I think we saw that in dental and things just changed. Like the word, DSO is, right, a dental service organization. And when DSOs first emerged, they were like the Antichrist. Like it was, if you sold to a DSO, you were like, should have lost your dental license. Now it's just commonplace, people coming out of school. We speak at a lot of the dental schools to students graduating, and they're all like, I'm talking to a couple DSOs. I'm talking to a few DSOs. And so I don't know if that'll happen in aesthetics or when or whatever, but I think there's a space for everyone. It's just kind of, again, really just staying true to the core and just continuing to give great service. Again, very cliche, but like that's what I've seen work. When we were building our group, like we were a DSO, but I didn't know that at the time, right? We had 10 practices, 20 practices, 30 practices. They were all branded different, different names up until probably the last couple of years we rebranded them. But they were all just run like, blank family dental. They were your local dentist. And we were chugging along okay, even as the massive, Aspen Dentals of the world and these big groups were emerging around us. So there is hope, I think, but those folks should still know that they're going to come calling. So at least be prepared for that phone call or that LOI to show up.
But I think if people know they can survive, it'll be less polarizing. I think the fear that I can't survive makes me hate it. It makes me want to fight out against it. And I think there are many people who have proven, who are in heavily competitive markets with a lot of PE money, that are proving that you can be an amazing, medical spa, aesthetics, wellness center, and do a great job and compete neck and neck. It's just a different kind of model. It's just a different setup. And whenever you're tired, go sell, because you're obviously able to compete. So go sell and get more money from it. So I think that, there is such a benefit to the industry. As you get money in, we start to consolidate as an industry. We become more professional. We look at, reporting and all these things that other companies like corporate America has been doing for 100 years. People don't have reports in aesthetics. They don't have like a P&L. They don't have, because we haven't had to have that. We're still at such a baby industry. You get some more business influence in, you start to really mature and become more sophisticated. And I think we will all benefit from that greatly as we continue to push the envelope about saying you have to have these things in place to be considered. So I think the industry is changing for the better in so many ways, fundamentally or foundationally, because of the wave of PE, because you have to be able to compete. So you got to button it up. So I'm, for one, grateful for it. Whether you sell or not, I don't care. The idea of what they're bringing here, I think, is important. But let's discuss another kind of M&A, because I don't hear about this very often. I do in corporate America every day, but not in aesthetics. What about an incremental investment or a partnership where, like you guys see Shark Tank, I'll take a 50% stake for X amount of money. Does that happen very often? Because I never hear about it ever. And it seems like a very logical thing for me to do if I were, in a practice.
Yeah. So, you're very right. Like we kind of talk about, I know I talk about a lot of times, it's almost like MSO or no MSO, right? Or, PE group or kind of the little person, right? And there's plenty of like flavors in between. You can just get some private investment from people to go out and grow. You can get, you get a loan from your cousin, technically that could qualify as like PE, right? It's private money that's coming in. So there's a lot of nuances within even this whole investment scope. We see it a lot more. I've seen it a lot more in like the dental space, optometry, some of these more, further along industries, I think, just from like a transactional standpoint. But now we're starting to see it in aesthetics as well, like almost people taking a silent role, right? And so if there's money involved, they're investing may not be fully silent, but they're not really taking control of the practice. I know myself, when I talk to clients, the last thing I would want to do if I was going to go purchase something is to just say, no, I know best, and so I'm coming in there with my big dollars. And I'm going to kind of dictate to you now how we should do this. Right. And again, Ben actually, I think talked about this on your podcast. It's like, make as few changes as possible. So I think some of these kind of smaller, fractional type of roles that, or like cash injections that smaller groups will make is great, right? Because there's no fundamental changes going on. We're just going to inject some capital so we can go out and even open a new practice or, upgrade our, our EMR or whatever it is. And I think that's a great middle ground for folks who are not ready to just like let go, but do need help getting to that next step, right? Certainly there's traditional bank financing always to, but in today's landscape, maybe we don't love, rates and things are kind of getting a little spooky there. So, if there's access to capital in a lot of ways, and there's a lot of people, again, who don't have ill will and like want to help you genuinely grow and they may not know the business. They just heard like, hey, med spa is sexy, right? Like this is the new thing. So yeah, so there's different kind of flavors in between like the two extremes of like I'm solo or I'm, going corporate.
Well, and if you're a person taking a cash injection of some sort, I think there's a part of it that you look at who wants to invest in you and say, what benefit do you bring me other than just money? Can you help me with my HR, with my, real estate part of my business, my medical, let's say you're a physician and I'm a nurse, is that part of it? Are there things that you give me other than just money? Because I can go get money anywhere. I mean, I'm in aesthetics, right? I can go find money somewhere in aesthetics. Can you give me value or bring me something better, more efficient, effective, optimized, whatever it is, because you personally are the one doing it for me? You're the partner that's coming in. I think that's part of, in corporate America, you think about that a lot. Like, who is the partner? What is their expertise? What do they specialize in? What's their portfolio look like of, existing companies? Here it's like, you got a big fat paycheck, we'll take it.
Right.
We forget to see or to ask, what is the benefit to me to work with you versus others? And so I think that there's, when you start getting into those injections, those like microfinancing kind of things, that's a different conversation than saying, I'm going to buy you outright and own it all. So just things to think about as you guys, do this, or, a second location that has a partner, or third location has a partner. So there are things like this that I think happen every day. But what if it goes bad? So what if I have a partnership, or, even I own a business together and we break up as a group? How much of that do you work with to help? Because that's a big thing right now happening as well, as like they're, breaking up, and it's like, what do we do? Where do we go? How do we get help? Because we need almost like a therapist in between to broker the deal for us to take away our pieces and go home into our own corner and cry. So what does that look like for you when they exit involuntarily, if you will?
Great. This feels like a bar exam question. And it is like, unfortunately, right? Like a marriage, it's very common that, half the time it may not work out. And so we've got to prepare for that. So our strategy is probably no surprise. Like let's try to plan for the worst case scenarios from the beginning. Right. And it's actually one of the downsides of like, when I always had this view of an attorney, I'm like, they're just so negative. It's like, they're thinking about the worst things. And now I get it. I'm like, oh yeah, because we like have to, right? We have to, as like an entrepreneur, we're always like, there's so much opportunity, there's so much upside. And then as an attorney, you're kind of like, we got to mitigate all this risk. So my job is try to find this happy medium. And so looking at the downside is usually very important when we kick things off, right? And working through like an operating agreement, or shareholders agreement, depending on people's corporate structure. Basically, what does the partnership look like? And we have to go through and have a very candid discussion with, both parties or however many folks are involved, and say, okay, let's plan for death, disability. It's just not working out like you talked about, an involuntary dissolution. Somebody does something egregious and like, we've got to move on from them. Our goal, again, my goal is not to have our folks end up in court, our clients end up in court, myself end up in court, right? It's really to try and plan ahead so that if and when these things don't work out, which sometimes they don't, it's hopefully not as hostile as it often feels, right? For people going through it. I mean, it's terrible. People have been through a breakup or a divorce, even, very successful organizations can like topple almost because there's just a fallout at the top. So I think really planning, like buy-sell agreements you mentioned earlier are super important. Something that I didn't even realize like how important it was until like later on in my career. And you start to see things falling apart, or, somebody, God forbid, passes away, and it's like, now their spouse is like my partner technically in this business. There's so many areas that we want to keep away from. So I think really planning for the worst, hoping for the best is always a good strategy when we start. Sometimes it gets ugly at the end. It does, like, no matter what's in the agreement. That's when I start calling in the big guns, the litigators and all that. And I say, okay, here's my client, be gentle with them. But we use our resources when we get there. But for the most part, again, you see people like really trying to make things like, I feel like people are vetting each other a little bit better these days than I used to see, where it was like, they have a great conversation. All right, let's go into business together, back of a napkin deal. And I don't know, maybe that means the attorneys are doing their jobs, but hopefully they're working out a lot of that in advance.
I think it's It is an anomaly. No, it's not. This industry is not different than the other industry. It's a different maturity level. We're not old enough yet to have kind of come full circle. But I have really close girlfriends who are great at business, who did like bartering agreements. I'm going to barter with you for this. You're going to give me this. They didn't put a price tag on it, and now it's like the barterer can say, well, that's worth $5 million. Well, actually, it's worth 50 grand. Like, you didn't put a price tag on it. There's no contract in place that says it's worth X, and so I can pick my number, right? I can pick whatever I want to pick. I think it's like the bartering agreements that get people in trouble. Even if it's not the actual business partnership, it's all the things that you're doing as, vendor agreements get you in trouble. And when you give too much, you don't ask for things in return. And it's like having a post-nup when you're married. It's okay to now say, I don't have it in place now, but I probably should. Let's go to our attorney today and get this done so that if we do have to exit at some point, we are prepared. So I think it's never too late to make the right decision when it comes to like contracts and getting things on paper. But I think that you're right. No one comes into it with ill will or wanting to, you don't get married to get divorced. You get married to stay married. But sometimes it happens. So protect yourself. And also because it sustains your friendship too.
Right.
If you are friends when you come into business, if you have it all on paper and it's black and white, when you exit, you can still be friends because it's not personal. It's not emotional. It's like the contract says this, we have to do this. And, we're both bound and tied to it. So it is what it is.
Yeah.
I just think that there's a part of that is it's a safety net for me. I think it makes things much easier to know that something other than us is keeping us aligned and, keeping us in check, not just us personally doing it for each other. So
yeah,
I love contracts. I'm all for them.
And I think, that's where we tell clients, I'm like, listen, we can be the bad guy. Like, it's okay, or the bad person. Like, let us, let us like go through all these awful scenarios and draft it all. And like, so when it does happen, you guys can be like, the attorney said we had to do this, but, I don't have any ill will. I'd much rather that because, probably will spare friendship than we didn't plan because we didn't want to talk about it, and yes, it's uncomfortable to talk about these things, but like, let's do it up front and let's go into this like professionals, because that way if it doesn't work out, we can hopefully dissolve this thing and have a drink afterwards, so that's, I don't know, maybe that's too ideological. I'm not sure.
You know what else is uncomfortable? Bankruptcy. I mean,
it is.
It's like what level of discomfort do you want to live in? Because I don't want to be bankrupt. And I think that is a true reality. I mean, your entire life savings, your nest egg. That's where I think the private equity money coming in is actually such a benefit for people because it's like a safety net of, I built a great thing. I can exit and I can do it in a legal way that's very much a paperwork driven. There's rules, regulations, there's, all these things are there that protect both of us. And I can walk away knowing that I did it the best way I could because I had people like you involved. I had advocates like you involved fighting for me and doing the things for me that needed to be done. Or if you're on your own doing it, kind of figuring out your behind, your napkin scenario, you don't have that. You just have to hope that they're a good person across the table from you. So yeah. I don't know. I think that we're in a very interesting impasse as an industry. Do we want to grow up and become sophisticated, or do we not and stay like this kind of disenfranchised or, non-consolidated kind of plethora of characters? Right. I think it's going to become more of the, the consolidated model. I just read an article this morning on LinkedIn. A few physicians, Joel Cohen, Jay Burns here in Dallas, they've had this new group that they're forming called CPP, or these physicians are buying practices, like a physician kind of fund, if you want to call it that, to help physicians be owners of their practices while also being inside of a big GPO. So there's some really cool things popping up every day to make it more attractive and lucrative and retain your rights as a practice owner. So you can still be the entrepreneur inside of a bigger group. So anyway, my point in saying that is that it's evolving every day as well, just like we are. And so we're seeing some really cool, neat new investment ideas coming up. Better PE firms getting involved, more niched firms who just do aesthetics, who are focusing on this industry, much like what you're doing on the legal side. So I'm positive for the future. I think we've got some great things in the next 5 years. Where are we going? Tell us where we're going to go as an industry.
I think it's exciting. I mean, I think, I think you just hit it on the head. Like these groups that it's like more and more eyes are slowly turning, maybe not slowly anymore, but are turning to this industry. I mean, I remember having kind of networking calls with, groups out of PE-backed, med spa groups out of like Canada a couple of years ago. And they're like, listen, we're going to be, without using the word infiltrating, but we're going to be infiltrating the States. Right. And like, now I'm seeing it. So I absolutely agree. Like the consolidation is going to continue, if not, even, exponentially increase. I mean, I was looking at some of the numbers the other day. I mean, they're talking about we're what, a $15 billion industry, which is crazy already, but talking about doubling that in 10 years, right? It's like Wall Street's going to find that, or is already finding that, right? Their money is going to follow it. The profit margins are great. The EBITDA margins are overall, really strong. So we're going to continue this trend. Absolutely. And like you said, it really doesn't have to be, it definitely will scare a lot of people who are new to this kind of, this world, this finance world. Suddenly everyone's, but 10 years ago, I didn't hear a single person use the word EBITDA. Now I feel like every discussion I have with an injector is asking me about their EBITDA. So, it's interesting because you see like corporate America, finance now tying into this world. But I don't think, like you said, I don't think it has to be a bad thing. I think there's a lot of benefit that can come from it, a lot of growth. And I think it's okay too for folks to know, like, you can ask some tough questions about your suitors as well. If someone's considering a sale, like, it's okay to be like, why you guys, why are you the right, fit for me? And I think it doesn't just have to be a one-way like investigation of your practice. Really get to know who is looking to buy you or partner. Sometimes they'll say like affiliate with. Get familiar with that person too, because you want to make sure that you're going down the right path where you want to be in 5 years. You're not going to be signing an employment agreement and then just be miserable for a few years after that.
Well, yeah, because it's twofold. I'm going to have to work there for a few years after, right, as the entrepreneur, but also because I've raised this baby. I'm going to give that baby away to someone. And are they good parents? I mean, I think that there is a part of it that's just, as a human, you build this thing, it's yours, it has your DNA all over it, and then you're going to give it away to someone else. Like, you want to make sure it's in good hands and your patients are in good hands and that the legacy that you built and your community is in good hands. Like, there's so many things, implications beyond just the money that I think about every day, even with our business here. Like, if we ever sell, will someone take as good of care of it as I would? And if the answer is no, it's not the right fit for us. We find somebody different. So I think there's a lot of things in there, emotional things as well as like monetary things. But the EBITDA thing is so funny. I hear all the time, this EBITDA thing, what does that mean? Or like, what does this mean a 6X? Like, do I need a 7X? And
right.
Like, if you can get a 7X, you call me, honey. That's what I tell you. But different conversation entirely. But for the record, you have been a fantastic guest, as I knew you would, because you're full of so much great information. And just a wealth of knowledge and easy to talk to about all these things, especially the hard conversations. But tell the audience how to find you, for one, how to get a hold of your law firm. Also, if you're going to be speaking anywhere, where you'll be, how to find, your blog, your content, because I'm telling you, you're prolific right now. You're writing content all the time. So give us all your deets.
I wish my kids could hear all that and hype me up the way you do every morning. So, well, first of all, thank you so much, because I've learned a ton from you and getting familiar with, all the guests you have on, and haven't watched, like, I've been, really binge watching. So thank you. And so, yeah, Marti Law Group is the law firm, and literally spell it out, Marti Law Group. .com is the website. Very active on social, trying to get better with our content, like we discussed, but Instagram. Actually, fun fact is that our Instagram is @_Marti Law Group, because 41-year-old me tried to set up the Instagram account and didn't know what I was doing. So I broke it apparently, and we had to do a new account. I don't know. You guys could probably help me fix that. But so there's an _ there on Instagram. And, shoot us an email. It's my first name @Marti Law Group. And we'd love to, do a free consultation, talk about where you're at in the life cycle of this thing, see what makes sense. Is it, doing an agreement? Is it doing a membership? We really aim to be like truly like a legal partner, something that I kind of wish we had as we were scaling our group. We also rolled out kind of a sister business, I guess, which is we do kind of model template documents, because we've realized for a lot of folks, again, things add up quickly. So these are attorney drafted documents. Now I have to say with those, like, you're not getting legal advice, it's a template, and it's a lot better than probably what you're going to get on, the Legal Zooms of the world or whatever, but it's not hiring an attorney. No offense to LegalZoom. It's not hiring an attorney, so we give you instructions on, hey, here's a delegation agreement. Here's what you need to put into it. But you need to be familiar with the state regulations, which is generally why people say, how much to just hire you, because this is overwhelming. But we offer that too. It's called My Model Docs. And really it's just kind of help from a price point standpoint, where folks are just like, my budget is so tight right now, but I need to get some agreements in place. We have, your startup kit, right? Like your med spa startup package. And and it's got a few documents in there to really kind of help people get off the ground. So those are kind of the service offerings. And, we absolutely would love to talk to people, and no strings attached, just kind of get acclimated with where you're at in your life cycle. Can we help you? Again, we're very quick to tell you if we can't help you, and try to get you pointed in the right direction. But, we love being in this industry. We're like super grateful that we kind of, came in the back door and found our way in it, because I continue to learn every day. And I don't know, like I said, I'm the nerd theme. That's me at heart. So I've got to say, like, I want to keep learning, and this is a great world to do it in.
Well, I think you're doing a great job of keeping the right attitude, the right sort of aura about you as you're doing it, which I think is really compelling, especially as, again, the tough conversations, even the documents. You should have led with that. Like, hello, people need that. They ask us for consents. I'm like, I'm your EMR. I don't write consents for you. Call your attorney. But we can ask every day if we can provide consents and questionnaires and delegation documents, and how many charts should they sign? I'm like, I don't know. Call your medical board. I have no idea. I'm not in your nursing board, so we can ask these questions too. So now I'm going to say, go get a consultation and deal with Justin's team. They'll help you. But hopefully you'll be here at Aesthetic next year to share more knowledge on stage, and throughout, hopefully even again in webinars and things with our own customer base, because what you have to say, I think, is really important and very pertinent right now in the industry, especially with all the changes happening. So when will we see you again? Are you going to be on any podiums anytime soon, or doing any webinars, or where can we tune in and watch?
We're kind of, I feel like we're coming into like, conference season again soon here. So we're going to be, we have a lot of kind of dental stuff going on, and the aesthetics world. We've got, if you're familiar with IECSC, which is in New York City, the International Aesthetics Conference, we'll be doing a couple of speaking spots there. Aesthetic next is like number one and circled on my calendar. Hopefully, I'm waiting to get an invite. I haven't gotten the mail yet, but I think it might be coming. And so that would be super cool. And yeah, I mean, we love doing webinars. We love discussing this stuff and kicking it around. So I'm always open to whatever you suggest. I've really looked at you as a mentor, so I appreciate it.
Well, we're going to have you on a webinar for sure, but for sure, Aesthetic Next, invitations in the mail, in the email,
in
the social DMs, we'll send a carrier pigeon, whatever we have to do to get it to you. But you're for sure invited. But that's all for us today. I feel like we've gone through the whole world of legal, med spa ownership and the whole thing, but there's so much more to learn. So guys, I'll put this all in the comments for you, or on the podcast write up, to get a hold of Justin and his team and learn more about what he's doing and how to help your practice. So give him a call, give him an email. I beg of you to go get your house in order if you can before you want to go sell, before anything happens. Clean it up, get it ready to go. Spit shine the whole thing. You'll be glad that you did, grateful that you did. So, anywho, with that, Justin, we're going to sign off, and I will see my team next week. And how about you? We'll see you hopefully soon too.
All right, thank you, Tiffany.
Bye, guys. Thanks for listening to another episode of For the Record. This podcast is not intended to provide legal or medical advice. It's for entertainment, education, and information purposes only. For more information on this week's guest, or to get started with Aesthetic Record, email us at info@aestheticrecord.com. Be sure to tune in next week for more fresh perspectives on disrupting the status quo and surviving in the aesthetics industry.